Rebecca Williams was a confident and successful woman, but on the day she entered the bank, her world changed dramatically. The managers didn't just deny her a loan, they humiliated her, seeing her not as a businesswoman, but as a black woman unworthy of their attention. This incident not only reopened old wounds, but ignited a fury in her that would change everything. What she did next would surprise even the most hardened individuals. But let's start from the beginning. Rebecca Williams, a confident woman with a thriving career, was used to fighting for her rights. This time, she had come to the bank with the firm intention of expanding her business. For several years, her company, which specialized in developing eco-friendly products, had been gaining momentum, and for the next phase of growth, she needed a loan. In her hands were documents showcasing an excellent credit history, profit reports, and promising growth plans. She knew her business was more than capable of handling the new financial obligations. However, on this day, she would be faced not with an evaluation of her financial capabilities, but with deeply ingrained discrimination. When Rebecca approached the counter, she was greeted by a young bank employee, Sarah, with a forced smile. Rebecca, accustomed to this kind of reception, didn't think much of it. Calmly, she explained the purpose of her visit and handed over the necessary documents for the loan application. Sarah took her time. She glanced briefly at the papers and, without even reviewing the details, tossed them on the desk. "You know how many people come in here with the same great stories?" she sneered, looking Rebecca up and down. "You probably don't fully understand how finance works." At that moment, another employee, Tom, the senior client manager, approached them. He looked at Rebecca's documents, smirked, and added mockingly, "Applications like these go straight to the trash. The rates for people like you aren't for this bank." Tom's words sounded like a final verdict. He spoke with such ease and confidence, as if the matter was already settled and nothing needed further discussion. His dismissive attitude made it clear that this wasn't about financial risks or loan terms. There was something deeper in their eyes, the bias that Rebecca had faced all her life. She stood silently before them, seething inside with humiliation and anger. At that moment, memories from her childhood flashed before her eyes. Her father, always proud and resilient, often told her, "Never give up, no matter how tough it gets. Your strength lies in your perseverance." These words had helped her overcome many obstacles on her path to success. But now, standing in the bank, Rebecca once again felt the very injustice she had been fighting against since childhood. She realized this wasn't about her credit history or her business. These employees didn't see a successful entrepreneur. They saw a black woman they had already mentally categorized as a failure. Rebecca felt her confidence waver. The internal voice of doubt began asking questions. What if they're right? Maybe I shouldn't aim for more. Her hands trembled, but she couldn't allow herself to show weakness. Rebecca gathered her documents, said nothing, and turned to leave the bank. Outside, the cold air hit her face like a slap, pulling her back to reality. She stopped, trying to process the flood of emotions. Shame, anger, disappointment. All of it swirled together in a powerful wave. But what hurt the most was that this wasn't the first time. Her whole life had been a battle to prove her right to succeed in a world that looked at her through the prism of her skin color. Rebecca headed home, where her family's support awaited her. Her father always said the world was unfair, but giving up was not an option. Today's incident reopened all her old wounds, but it also awakened something more. The desire not just to fight, but to change the system that allowed people and institutions like this to degrade others. After the humiliating visit to the bank, Rebecca felt drained, but her inner resilience wouldn't let her give up. She knew that if she backed down, it would be just another example of racism winning. She decided to take action. Her first step was to reach out to civil rights organizations. Rebecca contacted one of the largest organizations fighting discrimination in the financial sector and consulted with a lawyer who helped her file a complaint. He warned her that the process might take time, but Rebecca was prepared for it. She decided to bring public attention to the issue. Rebecca began sharing her story on social media, emphasizing that this wasn't an isolated case, but part of a larger system of racial discrimination. Her posts gained traction, sparking widespread discussion. People shared her story, offered support, and shared their own experiences. Soon, her story made it to local news outlets, which raised the issue of racism in banking. The support from the community gave Rebecca confidence. Online petitions were launched, demanding that the bank acknowledge its mistake and change its policies. Now she wasn't just fighting for herself, but for everyone who faced discrimination. Rebecca was invited to a business conference for African American entrepreneurs. There, she met many successful people who had also battled bias. One of them was Charles Martin, a well-known investor and board member of the bank. After hearing her story, he said, "You've brought attention to an important issue. I offer you a partnership. Together, we can change not just one bank, but the whole system." This offer opened new doors for Rebecca. Now she saw that her fight went beyond a single incident, and she had a chance to change the system toward fairness and inclusion. A month had passed since Rebecca's story about discrimination at the bank had gone viral. Her battle had begun to affect not only the media, but the bank's operations as well. The reputation scandal took its toll on the branch. Sarah and Tom, the very employees involved, could barely hide their nervousness. They hadn't expected that denying a loan would lead to such a backlash on social media and in the news. Serious discussions began within the company. Despite the pressure, the bank hadn't admitted fault. The leadership tried to downplay the situation, claiming it was a misunderstanding and that the bank's policy had always been neutral. But under the weight of media and public criticism, it became clear that the problem couldn't be ignored any longer. Meanwhile, Rebecca continued to grow her business and participated in initiatives to combat discrimination. And then, unexpectedly, she received an offer that changed everything. The bank's leadership, realizing they needed to save face, decided to take drastic measures. To show their willingness to change, they offered Rebecca the position of CEO at one of their branches, focused on fighting internal discrimination. Now the bank wanted to prove to the public that it was ready for reform. Rebecca was surprised. A month ago, she couldn't have imagined that this same bank would offer her such a role. Her first thoughts were cautious. Perhaps they wanted to use her as a symbol of change. But after analyzing the situation, she saw an opportunity for real transformation. Rebecca's decision was based on the belief that change had to start from within. She realized that by taking on this role, she could tackle the discrimination Black clients faced firsthand. This was her chance not just to demonstrate resilience, but to change a system that allowed such discrimination to exist. With excitement but determination, Rebecca accepted the offer. She knew this was an opportunity to make a difference, not just for herself, but for everyone who had suffered under this system. When Rebecca Williams returned to the bank where she had been humiliated just a month before, she was no longer the woman holding documents for a loan. Now, she was confident and strong, and her status as CEO instantly changed the atmosphere. The employees, including Sarah and Tom, no longer dared to look at her with the same arrogance as before. Their gazes were now filled with tension and fear. For Sarah and Tom, it was a harsh realization. Just a month ago, they had deemed her unworthy, mocking her application, and now she was their boss. Their words and actions reflected not just personal prejudice, but systemic discrimination. Though their behavior had changed, their past words hung in the air like a silent reproach. Aware of her new power, Rebecca chose not to seek revenge. She understood that revenge wouldn't solve the problem. Instead, she aimed to change the bank's culture so that every customer would be evaluated on merit, regardless of race or status. Her goal was to build a culture based on respect and fairness, one that would dismantle discriminatory practices. At her first staff meeting, Rebecca addressed the employees. "A month ago, many of you saw me in a different role. I'm not here to find fault. We must learn from our mistakes and change. This bank will become a model for overcoming bias and discrimination." Her words were aimed at collective awareness. Sarah and Tom understood that their behavior had been part of a system that supported bias. In the following weeks, Rebecca actively implemented diversity and inclusion programs, revised customer service policies, and launched initiatives to support Black entrepreneurs. Under Rebecca's leadership, The transformation became an example of how to change a system from within. She not only achieved personal success, but also turned the bank into a symbol of justice, proving that systemic injustice could be overcome through determination and resilience.